Fridays are awesome. Thank you for spending 10 minutes of yours with CNN Student News. I'm Carl Azus. Think about the ground covered by a football field. Now multiply that by 10,000 and you have an idea of how much land has burned in California's San Diego County. In the city of San Marcos in southwestern California, one wildfire was nearly uncontrollable. Hundreds of people had to be evacuated, schools were shut down, a college graduation ceremony was canceled. Firefighters are working around the clock, doing everything they can to save homes and businesses. One of the worst droughts the state has ever seen, plus hot temperatures and high winds, have all combined for what's being called tinderbox conditions. And California's wildfire season is just beginning. 12,500 objects, 580 hours of film and video. Rescuers, families of victims, and survivors of the September 11th terrorist attacks had access to all of that yesterday at the dedication of the National 9/11 Museum. On Thursday, we showed you the tour that one of our anchors got in advance, but it didn't include one of the rooms in the museum. Families of those who died had access to that first. Today, we have a moving look inside that exhibit and inside the memories of some who visited.
Lined from floor to ceiling with smiling fathers, daughters, brothers, nieces, family, and loved ones. In the same way we have photos in our own homes, these pictures are alive with the memories of the birthdays and weddings, barbecues and baseball games of those we lost. What you will be looking at are the pages of the chapter in our history we call September 11th.
Where? Oh,
there he goes.
There he goes.
That's a good picture.
It is. You'll be so proud of your daughter. Just amazing, just like you.
Look at all these faces. Different people.
Wow.
There you are.
This is Hannah. This is you. This was a couple of weeks before 9/11 actually happened, so this is our last family picture.
I love this one.
Yeah. That's him. That's you. That's your smile. That's that mustache. That's you. You act just like him. Right? Mannerisms, everything is just like your father. You look like him.
Yeah.
And you act like him.
And sound like him.
A very moving piece. Next up today is an anniversary, the 60th anniversary. The historic Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, was handed down this week in 1954. It was actually 5 separate cases that were before the court. They all focused on segregation, separation by races in U.S. schools. The name Brown was for Oliver Brown, a man whose daughter wasn't allowed to attend 3rd grade in a white elementary school in Topeka, Kansas. The chief attorney in the case was Thurgood Marshall, who'd later become the first black justice of the Supreme Court. The verdict was unanimous. All justices agreed that in public education, the idea of separate but equal didn't work, that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The case started desegregation in U.S. schools.
Time for the shout-out. At their closest point about how many miles separate Russia and the U.S., you know what to do. Is it 2,300 miles, 1,540 miles, 90 miles, or 50 miles? You've got 3 seconds. Go! The Bering Strait, which separates Alaska and Russia, is just over 50 miles wide at its narrowest point. That's your answer, and that's your shout-out.
China has an ambitious idea to connect itself with the U.S. by railroad, and this is where the Bering Strait comes in. The high-speed railway would start in northeast China. It'd run through the Russian region of Siberia, connect with Alaska through a tunnel under the Bering Strait, and head south through Canada to reach the U.S. The trains would travel at more than 200 miles per hour. Experts say they'd cover about 8,000 miles over 2 days. China would pay to build it. But, and that's a big one, it's not clear if China's railway industry has the money. It's not clear if this is needed, as many travelers just fly. And Chinese engineers say the Bering Strait tunnel would need to be 125 miles long. That's 4 times longer than the tunnel under the English Channel. Engineers have never built something like that before. This project is just in the discussion phase for now. Also getting a lot of discussion, Russia says it's going to quit using the International Space Station 4 years early, and that would affect the U.S.'s ability to get to it. This likely has to do with the crisis in Ukraine. The U.S. has penalized Russia economically for its stance on Ukraine's crisis. Russia may be retaliating by ending its space station mission.
Given a final farewell again.
They were all smiles in the International Space Station this week. But could this be one of the last times that American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts journeyed together through space?
And the International Space Station.
Russian officials are taking the battle over Ukraine into orbit, vowing to abandon the space station 4 years early in 2020.
And liftoff.
And banning Russian-made rocket engines to launch U.S. military satellites. The Deputy Prime Minister even suggested astronauts instead use a trampoline.
The final liftoff of Atlantis.
And this is no small problem, because since NASA retired the shuttle in 2011, American astronauts have no other way up or down than hitching rides on Russian rockets.
The Russian announcement really means we need to rethink our reliance on them, because it shows we are dependent on them in ways that might have made sense 10 years ago but doesn't make sense anymore.
Well, you do the talking, Moscow.
The U.S.-Russian space partnership has thrived for decades, one of the most visible symbols of détente during the Cold War and the new peace after the fall of the Soviet Union. And it was very much a win-win. The U.S. saved billions on the shuttle. Russia made billions as a high-tech taxi service.
Okay, copy that.
U.S. officials express hope the Russian threat is just bluster.
It's most likely the U.S. will depend on private space companies such as SpaceX to develop new space vehicles to transport American astronauts to the space station. And as for Russian engines used to launch American satellites, the U.S. has stockpiled engines that supply good for about 2 years of launches. That is some coverage, but many believe that NASA and Washington really need to develop a more reliable, longer-term plan. Jim Sciutto, CNN, Washington.
When you have Highlanders, Falcons, Bucks, and Gazelles all in the same place, you must be watching the CNN Student News Roll Call. The Highlanders are in Somerville High School. It's in the city of Somerville in the Bay State of Massachusetts. The Falcons are at Nation Ford High School. It's in the town of Fort Mill in the Palmetto State of South Carolina. And the Bucks and Gazelles are at Yankton Middle School. We found them in Yankton in the Mount Rushmore state of South Dakota. You might be first in your graduating class, you might be last. This girl is both. Charlie Gerleski will be the only student in her school to graduate this year. It's not because everyone else failed, it's because her high school in Texas is new. Its upperclassmen are in the 11th grade. The first time the school will have a 12th grade is next year. But Charlie took on the work of a junior and a senior to finish a year early. And that puts her truly in a class by herself. Of course, we wish her and all of you seniors congratulations. We hope you commence doing great things and that you'll always stay classy. I'm Carl Azus, CNN Student News. We'll be back next week. We hope to see you then.